April 15th, 1990, Easter Sunday. Ray and Marie Thornton thought they were just out for a drive, two school teachers enjoying the stillness of Michigan's backroads. They had no idea that they were about to become witnesses to something horrifying, something no one could ever explain away. They saw the van, they saw the man, they saw the sheets. What they didn't know was that a woman was already dead, and the man they saw was running from the truth he couldn't bury. This is not fiction. This is the real story behind the film that chilled millions. But the movie, it barely scratched the surface. This is what really happened. You're watching True Crime O'Clock, and this is The Vanishing Point, the murder of Marilynn DePue. If you find yourself holding your breath, don't worry. It only gets worse from here. Coldwater, Michigan, the kind of place where life moved slow, where folks nodded at the gas station, and news traveled faster than traffic. And where Dennis and Marilynn DePue lived what looked, at least from the outside, like a quiet, stable life. He was a property assessor, meticulous, reserved, the kind of man who liked order and expected it. She was a school counselor, warm, intelligent, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke and carried her own pain with dignity. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, a modest home on a quiet road, church on Sundays, birthdays at the bowling alley, family photos that said everything is fine, but everything was not fine. Behind the photos were secrets, arguments that lasted too long, silences that stretched for days, and Dennis, he didn't just want a family, he wanted control. He kept detailed records of Marilynn's comings and goings. He watched the mileage on her car. He accused her, often and without reason. But Marilynn, she'd had enough. After 18 years of marriage, she filed for divorce in 1989 and asked the court for full custody of the children. She told the judge Dennis was possessive, obsessive, that he hovered over her, refused to let go, even after she'd told him it was over. The court granted the divorce and Marilynn got the house, but Dennis was allowed to visit the children, and he wasn't ready to let go of the life he thought was still his. He moved into the guest house, just steps away from her back door. And even though the marriage was legally over for Dennis, it wasn't done. Not yet, because the man who once said, "Till death do us part," meant it. April 15th, 1990, a grey and quiet Easter morning in Coldwater. The kind of morning that should have been about family, warmth, forgiveness. Instead, it was the last day Marilynn DePue would ever be seen alive. Dennis had arranged to pick up the children as part of his visitation rites. Marilynn agreed. It was Easter, after all. She had made it clear she didn't want him inside the house. But Dennis, he wasn't there just to collect the kids. He showed up just after 9 a.m. And from the moment he stepped through the door, the air changed. Marilynn asked the children to get ready. Dennis asked her to speak with him, alone. She hesitated, then agreed. They went down to the basement, and minutes later, the shouting started. One of the children, their eldest daughter, said it sounded like he was accusing her of something, that his voice kept rising, sharp, clipped, frightening. Then came the crash. A sudden thud, then silence. When the children called down to ask what happened, Dennis's voice was flat, too calm. He told them their mother had fallen down the stairs, but when they looked down, they saw her, face bruised, struggling to stand, barely conscious. Dennis told them he was taking her to the emergency room. They tried to go with him. He said no. He wrapped Marilynn in a bedsheet, lifted her limp body over his shoulder, and carried her out. No ambulance, no phone call, just the sound of the family van pulling away. It was the last time the children would ever see their mother. The eldest daughter, shaken and terrified, called a family friend and begged for help. But by the time police arrived, Dennis and Marilynn were gone. The hospital had no record of anyone by that name coming in. There had been no fall. There had been no accident. There had been something else. That same afternoon, as police were beginning their search, Ray and Marie Thornton were out for a Sunday drive. 2 school teachers heading down a back road outside Coldwater, soaking in the quiet. They weren't looking for trouble, but trouble found them. As they drove along Snow Prairie Road, a cream-colored van sped past them, moving fast. Too fast for that kind of road. Something about it felt off. But they said nothing. Moments later, they saw it again, this time parked beside a run-down, abandoned schoolhouse. One of those rural buildings left to rot. Broken windows, sagging roof. The kind of place you don't stop near, but they slowed down just enough to look. That's when they saw the man. He was dragging something heavy from the back of the van. Something wrapped in a stained white sheet, soaked red, heavy, limp. He stopped, looked up at them, eyes fixed, expression unreadable. Ray and Marie locked eyes and kept driving. But it wasn't over. Seconds later, they saw the van again, behind them, gaining fast. The same man now tailing them, close, far too close. Every turn they took, he followed. Every stop sign, he crept forward, closer and closer. Ray said he kept checking the mirror. The van was always there, engine humming, lights flickering. Marie tried not to panic, but the air inside their car grew heavy, electric. What started as a drive was now a pursuit. And they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, whatever that man had in the back of his van, they were never supposed to see it. Ray and Marie Thornton did something that would change everything. They went to the police. They described the van, the schoolhouse, the man with the sheet, and this time, someone listened. By late evening, deputies were at the abandoned schoolhouse on Snow Prairie Road. They didn't need to look long. Just a few feet from the building, they found bloodstains on the ground, drag marks in the dirt, pieces of fabric caught in the weeds. They followed the trail around the back, where the sheet had been dumped, soaked through, stained deep red. It was no longer a missing persons case. A manhunt began for Dennis DePue. Police released an alert. His van, a cream-colored 1984 Dodge. His last known direction, unknown. Checkpoints were set up, his photo was circulated, his family questioned. But Dennis had disappeared, vanished like smoke. For hours, there was nothing, until the next morning, rural highway just north of Coldwater. A worker doing routine maintenance on the roadside shoulder notices something in the weeds, something white. He steps closer and freezes. The sheet was there, wrapped tight, discarded in a shallow ditch. Inside was the body of Marilynn DePue. She'd been shot in the back of the head, once, execution style. No one could say exactly where it had happened or when. But they knew this. Dennis didn't take her to the hospital. He didn't lose control for a moment. He planned this, and now he was gone. With Marilynn's body recovered and the evidence undeniable, Dennis DePue became a fugitive. But this wasn't panic. This wasn't random. Dennis had a plan. Over the next few weeks, friends and relatives began receiving letters. 17 of them, postmarked from different cities, different states, sent from borrowed addresses and highway mailboxes. Each one filled with long, rambling explanations, excuses, attempts to reframe the story. He wrote about being pushed, disrespected, blamed. He said Marilynn was the reason he had nothing left. He called her cruel, cold, said she turned the kids against him, poisoned the life they'd built. But in every paragraph, beneath every justification, was something colder. Not grief, not regret, control. Dennis wanted people to see his version of the truth, even if it was a lie written in blood. The letters weren't just an attempt to explain what he'd done. They were a desperate, distorted campaign to stay in control of the narrative. Even as he ran, the trail stretched across the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Texas. But each time the police got close, Dennis was already gone. Weeks passed, then months. The story began to fade from the headlines, from the public eye, until a national TV show changed everything. March 20th, 1991, nearly a year after Marilynn's murder. Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment on Dennis DePue, a dramatization complete with actors, photos, timelines, and for the first time, his face was on screens in living rooms across the country. He was no longer a mystery man hiding in the shadows. He was a wanted killer, and the world had just seen him. March 20th, 1991, 11 months after Marilynn DePue was murdered. Unsolved Mysteries aired a reenactment of the case. Millions were watching. It showed Dennis's face, the van, the blood-stained sheet. It told the story the way the world needed to hear it, plainly, painfully. Most people turned off the television and went on with their night. But one woman in Dallas didn't. She sat there, frozen, because the man on the screen, the one wanted for murder, looked exactly like the man in her living room. He'd told her his name was Hank Queen. He said he was from Virginia, that he traveled for work, that he didn't like talking about his past. She'd always thought he was private, maybe a little strange. But now she was staring at his photograph on national television, and the name underneath it wasn't Hank. It was Dennis DePue. She didn't confront him. She waited until he left, then picked up the phone. She called a friend, someone she trusted, and told her everything. That friend made the next call to the Unsolved Mysteries tip line, and just like that, everything changed. Within hours, the tip had reached law enforcement. They had a location, a new name, a city, and finally, after a year of silence, they had a lead. March 21st, 1991, less than 24 hours after the Unsolved Mysteries broadcast, Dennis DePue was spotted. A motorist in Louisiana recognized the van, cream-colored, aged, unmistakable, parked outside a gas station near Vinton. State troopers were alerted, and Dennis took off. What followed was a high-speed chase across the Louisiana-Mississippi border. Lights flashing, sirens blaring, the van weaving through traffic, desperate to outrun the consequences. For miles, Dennis held the wheel, like a man who knew the road ahead was running out. Eventually, it did. He hit a dead end just outside of Greenville, Mississippi. Officers surrounded the van, weapons drawn. They called out to him, told him to exit, hands first. There was no response. Then one sound, a single shot. Dennis DePue was dead. He had turned the gun on himself just moments before they could bring him in. The man who had stalked, planned, murdered, and run for almost a year had chosen silence over justice. There would be no trial, no confession, no answers, just a van, a body, and a question that still lingers. Why? Marilynn DePue was buried in Coldwater, Michigan. Her grave is modest, unmarked, a quiet place among the trees. Her children, now adults, rarely speak about what happened. They lived it, every second of it, and paid the price for someone else's obsession. The town tried to move on, but for those who remember, Easter Sunday no longer means rebirth. It means something stolen. Years later, a horror movie hit theaters. Jeepers Creepers. A van, a remote road, a body disposed behind an abandoned building. Viewers were terrified, but some couldn't help but feel they'd seen it before, because fiction had mirrored fact. But this story was never about a monster in the dark. It was about a man in the daylight who believed he was entitled to everything even after it was taken away. A man who refused to lose, so he took everything with him. You're watching True Crime O'Clock. If this story chilled you, stay with us. There's more where this came from. Subscribe and keep the clock ticking.